Hey, we're joined this morning by Mark Ledbetter, and I've been looking forward to this segment with Mark for some time now. And Mark has written a book entitled Driving Mr. Charlie, a trip down memory lane with a man facing dementia. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Linda.
Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
And the book is available, is it not?
It is available. You can go to Amazon, of course, and then I have a few copies at the house.
Okay.
So if you give me a call or contact me, I can make them available.
Now, let's begin this morning. Of course, Charlie was your father.
Yes.
And he and your mom were living together, been married a long time, and you began to see signs that concern you, but you didn't know what it was. Let's take that walk this morning.
Well, we moved back to Sylacauga in 2004, and then my dad had have 5 bypasses in 2005. And after that, we began to see just a few telltale signs. We didn't know what we were looking at, of course. But here was a man who turned his checkbook over to my mom, and he always kept up with the finances. And so that was unusual for us. And then there were some other telltale signs. He just couldn't place certain things. He'd complained about not being able to think like he used to. And
Go back a little bit, Mark, and talk about your dad when his health was good. He was a strong, active man.
Strong, active in the community, in the church. He did so many things at the church. I pastored for 28 years, and I often said I wish I had a member like my dad. He was active in the community, Civitans, Lions Club. He was active in the American Legion. He was assistant superintendent at Sedco for several years, working there. We moved to Sylacauga in '60. He started working there in Wilsonville during that time as head chemist and worked his way up. He was well respected, well liked, just a gregarious individual. He never met a stranger. If he met you, he would know your life history and you'd have a friend. And he was the type person who said, how are you doing? He wasn't just being pleasant or polite. He wanted to know how you were doing. So he was a very gregarious, outgoing, pleasant person.
Loved your mom.
Loved my mama, loved us. Barbara Jean from South Georgia. She lived on a farm outside of Vienna. And they met in Albany. And as I said in the book, Albany's in South Georgia, Albany's in New York. They moved from Brunswick and then to Sylacauga. But he was with Georgia Power. He started up in a little place called Toledo Falls. That's where he was from. He was born in Hollywood, Georgia. And his father and his uncles lived in a place called Tugelo Camp. It was kind of like an enclave for the workers there, and of course, being family and close community, everybody knew each other's business, and just a small community. And he grew up there, influenced by his dad. His dad had a great work ethic. He'd work in the evenings, plow by mule for a garden. He grew up with his mom was just probably his outgoing personality came from her. Her name was Dixie. That wasn't her given name, but she didn't like her original name, so she changed it. She was self-taught playing the piano and singing songs, so he probably got that from her. And but he went to North Georgia College, then he joined the Navy, came back, finished his education, went with Georgia Power, and worked with them for 38 years before he retired in I think it was 1988.
Now, driving Mr. Charlie, a trip down memory lane with a man facing dementia, you became the caregiver for your father, but before that, talk about the onset of this disease, and did you know what this disease was?
I had no idea what it was. Just some telltale signs. It's kind of it's a bittersweet because you can't help but laugh at some of the things because they are humorous and people think that might be morbid, but there are some things happen. You just can't help but laugh at it. But it was sad because I guess one of the strongest things is one day I came in and checked the garage for some reason. It had an incident with the car, and I looked at it, and the front left side of the car was mashed down, scratched. And so I went in and I asked my dad, I said, what happened to the car? He said, what are you talking about? So I took him out to the car and showed him that, and he said, I don't know. Now, I could imagine he hit something, did something, I don't know who or what did he hit. Then one day he fell and split the end of his nose. Mama called me, and I took him to ER, and when the doctors asked certain questions, I got a little suspicious, and then he fell a second time, so I took him to a neurologist. He gave him a battery of tests. He told him that he had developed dementia, in this case Lewy body dementia, which parallels Alzheimer's, but has Parkinson's symptoms. That accounted for some of the things. He had some of the characteristics of Parkinson's. And so after diagnosis, I took him home. Mom was sitting in a recliner. He was sitting in his recliner. I said, Pop, now we've got good news and bad news. The good news is we know why you're having problems. He had 5 mini strokes, several mini strokes after his surgery, or about the time of his surgery in 2005. And then he had developed the Lewy body dementia. And then I said, and Pop, the doctor said you can't drive anymore. And I'd given him, Mama was over there crying, and I talked to him, and he was absorbing everything I said. I said, you've got dementia, you've had strokes, but the only thing he heard is he couldn't drive. He says, I'm not giving up driving. Mm-hmm. And I understood that. That's his independence, and that's what happens with aging in particular, and especially in dementia.
How old was your father at this time?
Well, I wish I hadn't asked me that. 87, 80, 2000. He was in his early 80s.
Okay.
Some of the signs developed early, we just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So we had a struggle taking the keys from him. I kind of compromised a little bit along the way, but finally it came to a point where we just said, hey, Pop, you can't drive anymore. And he wanted to keep the keys because it felt good in his pocket. And I said, you can keep the keys, don't go anywhere. Either my sister, Sally Hepson, or I would drive them to the doctor's appointments or to Food World at that time, Walmart's, Palace Drugs, where he got his prescriptions. So my sister and I became chauffeurs until my mom died. And in the meantime, I was looking for some place that would help him. Assisted living of some type, not only for him, but my mom had developed some debilitating, because of autoimmune system deficiency. She developed some muscle mass problems, and then she died. She had a blood clot and died. So I moved in with him for 5 months, and that was really where the journey got intense, living with him for that time.
Dementia, devastating illness.
It is. My opinion is it's the cruelest disease we can encounter, and it's not from the one who suffers from the disease as much as it is the caregiver, the family, because all of a sudden they're seeing this individual they love, who had a personality, who had all these endearing characteristics, and all of a sudden they're just fading, like the sunset. It's just fading. They're slowly slipping away from you.
And you can't stop it.
There's no way. I know that they say that they know why it happens, but they can't. Up until now, I've not heard of any way of preventing it. Mm-hmm. It can be induced by old age. We have those senior moments, do we? You may not.
Oh, yeah.
You've not reached that age yet. But, we used to call it hardening of the arteries or senility, and I think those terms may still be in vogue some places. But it could be, part of this is that there's just the brain cell damage that takes place.
Did Robin Williams suffer from that?
He had Lewy body himself, and Glenn Campbell had Alzheimer's too. And it's just, it's a slow progressing disease. It can be induced by a brain injury. It could be alcohol and drug induced. It could be genetic. That's one of the reasons I was concerned, because my dad had developed this, and I talked to my cousins over in Georgia. My uncle had similar symptoms, and so all of a sudden I'm thinking, I'm doing the research about this, and So, I began to think I need to do some things to help stimulate the brain and read crossword puzzles, things like that to keep the brain active, eating more healthy if possible. But there's nothing I know that can stop it, and it's no pun intended, but it's a gray cloud is coming upon America because we know as baby boomers, we're susceptible to this. This is something that's coming. In the book, I share some statistics. 38% of people who are 85 and older have Alzheimer's. It's not including the others. We see that 44% between 75 and 84. Then we have a percentage of 15% of my age and older, 65, 74, have Alzheimer's. Then you have some people who have early onset. I know of individuals at 48 and 50, 55 who have suffered from Alzheimer's. And it's just no way to explain it. And so the best thing to do is recognize it's coming, and part of us are going to be touched by it in some way or another. People might not like this analogy, but every one of us probably has a family member or a close friend who's been affected by HIV or cancer. It will happen somewhere, somehow, and chances are it could be one of our loved ones, and we need to know, because there's no real way to adjust to it unless we know what to look for. And that's what part of the book is about.
So you move in with your father after your mom dies.
Yes, sir.
And you were there for?
I was there. My sister come in and relieved me. I was there 6 days out of the week. She'd come in. I'd relieve her on Saturday evening, and she'd go home, and she'd come, and while we could, she'd come and pick him up and take him to church on Sunday morning. But we eventually had to stop that because...
What did you see happen during that time with your dad?
It was a battle of wits, I describe it. His personal hygiene was an issue. His physical activity became issues. I remember for some reason, and I've learned this is not uncommon, but he didn't like to take showers. And it became a struggle. I said, Pop, you need to take a shower for various reasons. And here's a man who was a head chemist who had all this experience and was a well-reasoned individual, and for some reason he couldn't get the connection on why he needed to take a shower. It was partly because it was a physical struggle for him. He would be exhausted, he'd be tired, and so I went to the doctor. We had a home health aide come in, and she explained to him, Mr. Ledbetter, I'm here to help you. And she took his vitals and stuff, and she said, now I'm here to give you a shower, help you get a bath. And he just looked at her and he said, from my head to my toe? She said, yes, sir. He said, no. So that was part of it. He wasn't into that. I said, Pop, you need to take a shower. He said, I'll take one Saturday. I've been taking one every Saturday for 30 years. And I said, you expect me to think that you haven't had a shower except one day a week for 30 years? He said, well, at least since I've been living here. And so it became a battle. I tried to persuade him. I'd lay the clothes out for him, the towel out for him, and he'd go in and he would put the towel back up. He'd put this change of clothes back up, and it just became a struggle. And until I realized, and finally it dawned on me, hey, this is part of it. This is who they are, and there's really no sense in trying to explain all of things, talk down to them, or try to reason. You just have to learn to go with the flow, and that's hard because sometimes you're put in some difficult situations. He would often, when he finally landed we got him situated in a living assistance, he kept asking me, when is he going to take me to North Georgia to see his mom and dad and his parents? I mean, his aunts and uncles. And it got to where I quit explaining it to him. I said, well, I'll take you next week. And somebody said, you lied to him, of course. They're just, what can you do to someone who doesn't understand? But it made him happy, and some people think, well, that's wrong, but wait till you face that, then you see what you do.
Until someone walks in your shoes, it's very difficult to be judgmental. Driving Mr. Charlie, a trip down memory lane with a man facing dementia, written by Mark Ledbetter, is available today on Amazon, and Mark's got copies of it as well. How did it affect you?
I don't.
I mean, let's face it, your dad mentally wasn't there.
He wasn't there. It was a struggle for me for two reasons. One, this was not my father anymore. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I know of situations where people might be, and they say, they don't call them nursing homes anymore, but and families wouldn't go visit because they said, that's not my mom anymore. Right. That's not my dad. And so they just didn't go visit. That's sad. That's tragic. So it was hard watching him and trying to compensate for the issues that he was facing. I was trying to compensate, so it was difficult. And I really didn't have a whole lot of time as a caregiver as I did after we had him situated in a living assistance. Then visiting, he got to saying, introducing me as his father. And people come in and he referred to my sister as my mom. And it's sad. Mm-hmm. I guess the only emotion I had, it was sad. I'm just a type person, everybody grieves differently. When you have a situation like this, your grief is different than losing someone. Losing someone, you look back. You look back at all the contributing factors and you have all these feelings. Well, anticipatory grief is you experience all these things before it happens. And so they were sad. I never got the anger stage or denial stage. I just faced it head on. But there were just some issues that I really didn't deal with. And part of this book is dealing with it. And I want it to be a tool for other people. So for me, it was difficult in that respect. I miss his wisdom. I wish I paid more attention to him. There's times I go up to their plot in the cemetery, and you may think it's crazy. I just say, Mom, I wish she was here, because she always had that listening ear. And I'd say, Pop, I wish she was here. I need to ask you this question about this thing or another. I think a lot of people encounter those kind of episodes, and it's healthy in your grieving process to be able to do that. There's no proper way to grieve. They got these nice little formulas, but that's
the caregivers, Mark, has their own families too, outside of their father or their mother.
Well, those 5 months, basically, I lived with my dad, and my wife lived in our residence for those 5 months. That's that it impacts that aspect. Caregivers, or I'm going to just say it like this: caregivers are victims as well. They need a lot of attention and relief that they're not getting. And if I was going to be anything here this morning, be an advocate for caregivers, because they lose the loss of a loved one, they lose financial security, they lose intimacy, they lose so much. They get tired. Some people, when they do eventually die, there's this sigh of relief, and they feel guilty about that. But I understand what's going on with them. They have to endure contradictions. They have to endure misunderstandings, tension. Especially if the one with Alzheimer's gets into a stage of agitation and words are exchanged, and you just have to stop and think, this is not who this person is. And when you do that, it helps you a lot, but you still have this anguish, you still watch this, and it makes you wonder. For me, when I did the research I alluded to earlier, it makes me wonder, am I looking at myself 20 years from now? That's
very sobering, isn't it?
Sobering thought. I mean, there is a possibility that this could be our case based on statistics, and as these statistics I refer to, as more and more baby boomers reach these ages, those are going to go up. And it's a hard thing to do. People need to be prepared on what is going to take place. There's things they need to understand. They need to understand advanced directives. And the time to do it is before they get to that what they call the moderate stage, where their rational judgment is impaired. You need to have the advanced directives, which will be a living will, or do not resuscitate, or medical proxy. You need to have these things in place. Power of attorney. Power of attorney is so important. And the thing is, while it might be a husband and wife, whichever spouse suffers, in our case, it was Mom was gone, and my sister and I, we had to step in, and we had to take care of business before he reached that stage where the doctor said, do not let him sign any legal documents. It came to that. And fortunately, we had the power of attorney in hand 2 weeks before that doctor's directive. It's a very difficult. And I read this over and over. I've got typos in it, for one thing. So I got to go back and edit it and fix it. But it helps me stop and think about how the message is so important for people who are in my situation, children of people in my situation. They need to know, caregivers need to know what is going to be the next step. There is stages. It goes from anywhere from early to severe. Eventually, you're going to watch your loved one forget how to swallow. They're not going to be able to sit up by themselves. They're not going to be able to walk. This is the way it's going to be, and that's hard. That's hard. But unless we can anticipate that and know that, it'll make us sad, but it also gives us something to do. It's like Chaplain Winter said, it's like a roadmap. It gives you some idea of what to expect. Every course might be different, but these are the symptoms. These are the things that are going to happen, and we need to know. We need to know what's going to take place. We need to know what should we be doing in preparation. Like I said, the living wills, the power of attorney, all these things. We need to understand these things so that we can get these things in order. It's kind of like getting our house in order on behalf of our loved one. If we don't, it's going to cause chaos. Get your funeral arrangements made. Get those made. When I walked in to a funeral home and talked to the director, my mom and dad already had the plans, and all my sister and I had to do is provide the information and walk out there and plan the service. This is very important. This day and time, it's important. It can be done. It needs to be done, because the most volatile times I've ever experienced as a pastor and as a chaplain is when they don't have plans, and chaos and confusion and hard words and anger, all these things. Be prepared. It's going to happen. To what percentage, I don't know. You can look it up. There's resources. Look it up, find out.
Get the book.
Get the book.
Get the book.
That's what
Driving Mr. Charlie, a trip down memory lane with a man facing dementia, penned by Mark Ledbetter and forward by Glenn Winter, who's chaplain. We could talk on and on and on, and we're out of time, but get the book. Contact Mark. He's got copies of it. You can go on Amazon and get it as well. Mark, thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.